Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our NZ Tax webinar, where we will be showcasing what is coming up in our next release and beyond. These webinars are replacing our in-person tax admin user groups for the time being, giving us an opportunity to stay connected with you all and keep you up to date with everything happening in the tax world. So just some housekeeping. We will be placing everyone on mute to avoid any distractions during the presentation, but we do encourage you to please ask any questions via the message box on the right-hand side of your screen that says questions. We will answer these at various stages during the session. Now, we have scheduled this an hour for this session. However, it may finish earlier depending on the number of questions and comments that we receive throughout the session. Our presenters today are our New Zealand Tax Product Manager and Flowchart Expert, Nigel Babington, and facilitating the webinar today, our Senior Support Analyst, Craig Voigt, along with myself, Andrea Roberts, Client Success Manager for Consulting. So what will we be covering today? We will be detailing what is included in the next release. Now, we were aiming to release this at the end of the month, as we've always released in August. We have had some hold-ups, unfortunately, particularly with the integration piece with IRD, particularly around notifications. So this release will now be made available to you around mid-September. So in the release, we have the hot fixes since April and some enhancements that have been added to the desktop solution. We've also refined the B2B matching, particularly where reversals or ins and outs are concerned. And then on to our big ticket item, return lodgement via IRD's new Gateway Services web portal. Nigel will take you through the entire process that will replace e-file lodgement. And then we'll also cover off the new dashboard, which along with return lodgement, will allow you to manage client linking, delinking, and other bulk housekeeping services. We then want to cover off what is next on the roadmap, what you can look forward to next April and beyond as we move to a fully web-based, fully IRD integrated tax application. And we do want your feedback, so we will be throwing some ideas out to you for your consideration. We've also included 2 polls in the webinar and we encourage you to participate on those. So over to the Q3 release. As you'd expect, all of the amendments to the April release that have been made available to you through the various hotfix iterations are included in this release. This includes an enhancement of the residential rental income details. We've added a separate depreciation amount, and we've provided the option to create schedules for each of those deduction amounts. These changes then needed to trickle down into the residential rental report, which we have done. Now, the Working for Families worksheet has now been updated to include the 2nd and 3rd year abatement figures. And we've also fixed the bugs there were some in the IR3 non-residential return, there was an issue with partnership distribution, the report for the IR8, and there was also a less common refund transfer scenario that we have now fixed. So as you all know, there were some issues with the ledger not updating in certain circumstances where a 901 record was approved or above. So we have fixed that, and in fixing that, we've also added information on the net tax due calculation amount to show up on that ledger sync screen.
Hi, Andrea. Sorry for the interruption.
Yes.
We've just had a comment saying that well, they don't appear to have any sound. Can we just check if if anyone can hear you other than us organisers.
So is there anyone who cannot hear the presentation? Please pop a comment in the questions box.
Great, thanks.
Okay, so just a note, if you have missed any of the presentation, it is being recorded, so will be made available to you afterwards. So, yeah, it seems like most people can hear, so just check your audio settings if you can't hear. So, on to the client selection history default. Now, with the April release, we introduced a change in the tax manager's client selection form. By setting the history list selection mode when the form opens as a default, it shows the 15 most recent clients whose returns you have accessed. Now, if you want to toggle the list of selectable clients back and forth between this history list selection and the normal alpha text selection, you can, of course, use the shortcut key Alt plus H. Now, a few clients have indicated that they prefer not to use the history list selection mode as their default view. So we've accommodated this client feedback by introducing a default setting that each user can assign. The client selection criteria form is opened via the filter button, which sits alongside the client selection dropdown, as highlighted in red in the screen. We've added a history list as default flag that each user can assign, which now determines what state the client selection dropdown is in when the form opens. So it's the little things that count, right? Now, on to the ledger page and some discrepancies that were appearing in the TDS transactions area. Little bit of background here. When the IRD delivers the TDS income transactions, we do not have the tax year that each transaction belongs to. IRD does, however, provide a period end date applicable for each transaction, and we use that date to work back to which tax year it's relevant to. On rare occasions, the period end date provided by IRD is incorrect, and that can result in an incorrect tax year being set for a client's transactions, which I know is really frustrating. So to deal with this scenario, we're providing a new option that allows you to manually alter the tax year on unfiled transactions. You can limit the access to this specific function by ticking the new Joe setting, which is Allow IRD X Tax Year Move. And that's been added to the Joe Admin Tax Ledger node as highlighted in the screen there. So further TDS refinement, these are the features that were identified for consideration since the April release. The ones shown here with a green tick are available with this upcoming Q3 release. So we have improved the discard function so that some transactions incorrectly identified as reversals are no longer being discarded. This includes payments that offset holding assessments that IRD flag as a reversal. It also includes some of the transfer scenarios which were being treated as reversals for discard rather than offsets that should have been retained. On top of that, previously, when it came to a payment insert, we had hardwired a 14-day difference from an assessment's due date, which was used for determining if a payment was eligible for that insert. So instead of using that 14-day hardwired figure, we now use the existing SUPS setting as shown in the screen, previously just used for the date difference, which was allowed when auto matching payments. We are now applying to the auto insert of payments. Now, other improvements, so you can see there that there are still some outstanding, will be added iteratively via TDS over the coming weeks. This means that you or your IT will not need to actually install these, but rather they will be added to your database via the TDS cloud service. Now, over to you, Nigel, for the all-important web update.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Andrea. Okay, it's some stuff that's been going on the desktop. I'm now going to walk you through all of the new web-related features that we're including in this Q3 release. So to start with, as on the screen here, in Compliance Admin's Tax Admin band, you've got an ID activity log page. And this was used to show activity from the now obsolete Tax Agent web service that used to fetch transactions from ID's legacy system. And by the way, that service is completely redundant and should be removed from your server if it hasn't already been. So with the Q3 release, this page has now been updated to provide a log of various new web integration activities that we're implementing. So in that list there, when the TDS cloud service retrieves transactions, we're now going to write a log entry for each batch of transactions that's retrieved. When a return is lodged via the web, each submission to ID responds with a success or failure. And if we get a failure response for any reason, then you'll get a log entry created here also. A new IID service provides client tax type link info for all of your IID link clients. And depending on the way that you've onboarded things, if the client yet hasn't been onboarded from the desktop so that it's known to the web environment, we can add that missing client to the web data store. And we're also now receiving various different notifications from IID, and they'll be logged and visible in the list. And you'll be able to filter that list by date range as you were able to do previously, and these new notification type codes as we've shown in that drop down as an example. Okay, so the major focus of this release has been to enable you to end the current reliance on e-file for lodgement of tax returns. So we've created a new system setting, Gateway Services Lodgement, and that sits in your system and user settings. And with this release, the default setting is false. So what that does mean is that the desktop application will continue to use e-file until this setting is updated to true. So you can, if you wish, defer switching to web lodgement until that suits you. We would like to have everyone using the new lodgement services by the end of November though, well in advance of IID's e-file shutdown in March 2021. So the web application looks at all data from a tax agent perspective. There are several different interactions with IID built into the web application, and every IID interaction requires authenticated credentials to have been entered by you, the user. This requires you to enter your MyIR login and password, and that MyIR login is obviously associated with a specific registered tax agent. So to provide a way for you to control whether any one particular user has access to a tax agent's info and the taxpayer clients that are linked to that tax agent, there's a new fee earner user attribute called Web Linked Tax Agent. It's a multi-instance attribute, as shown in the example. And for each APS tax user, you'll assign the appropriate tax agent or agents via the fee earner console's details property page, which is where that new attribute is available. So there are two access points into the web application at present. One is from GST Console's web returns page that takes you directly to clients' web stored GST returns. The other access point is in the tax agent console via the web view page by using the agent web view button. The agent landing page was previously only used for that one-off operation to register the agent for TDS data retrieval. So access to this agent console page via the specific Joe settings has likely been restricted. There are, however, new agent web functions available with this release, and we'll discuss those shortly. But what that does mean is that there's going to be more likelihood that you'll want to have most of your tax users having access to this button, this access point into the web. We've relabeled the Joe setting to allow browser launch to make it more appropriate to the action you'll be enabling. With that Joe setting, as illustrated, you can allow users to access the tax agent console, but limit their actions in the console to just accessing the agent web view if you don't want them accessing any of the other pages in the tax agent console. We are also providing Joe's access settings to let you control who has access to each of the agent context web pages that are being provided, and then what can then be done in those pages. So we've split the original single agent page used for TDS registration into an agent details landing page and a separate TDS info page. On top of that, there are also two new pages. The first page, Client IID Links, allows you to manage the IID tax type links that you have for all of your clients. The Client Links Update Joe setting needs to be ticked to enable the user to submit any link or delink changes to ID though. The second page, Client Returns, displays a list of client returns that can be filtered in several ways. The Returns Lodgement Joe setting controls access to the e-file replacement functionality that allows you to submit returns to ID. Access to the two agent lists is not ticked by default with the release. You'll need to go into your Joe settings, obviously, then for those users that you want to provide access to. Okay, so here you can see the desktop statuses in the left-hand column and the equivalent web statuses on the right column. We've renamed the existing desktop e-file lodge status to ready to lodge so that it can apply to both e-file and web lodgement methods and be more contextually appropriate to those. Setting the status on an income return transforms the return in readiness for lodgement, either by creating an e-file blob, as it has done for many years, or when you're using the new web lodgement method, generating a cloud compatible version that is pushed to the cloud in readiness for lodgement. The existing desktop statuses are otherwise unchanged when you switch to Gateway Services lodgement, but the way in which they are updated does change. So GST returns have been available for a while now, and they are created in the web application directly. And when they're first created, they get this new status. To allow you to continue managing lists of returns from the desktop, however, a shell desktop GST return is also created if it's not already present. And then as each status change occurs in the web GST return, the equivalent status is applied to the desktop shell return. At present, the web return process finishes with the successful lodgement to ID via Gateway Services. For income and tax credit returns, they are still created in the desktop application. So when the prepared return has been approved for lodgement, the status is updated to ready to lodge. As part of the status update process, a web version of that return is then created. Status management of returns can continue to be managed from the desktop. As each status change occurs in the web GST return, the equivalent status is applied to the desktop return. The web app's agent view context is determined from the agent chosen in the tax agent console. The agent name is visible in the header bar and at the top of the left page menu. That's kind of indicates the landing page if you've chosen that top left menu there. The user options pop-up is visible by clicking the user button at the rightmost end of the header bar. If the user has access to multiple tax agents, you can switch agent via the current agent dropdown in user options. Here you can see the logged in APS user has access to the two tax agents that were set up in the fee earner console. We've provided a user level switch also to allow each user to switch their web app presentation between dark mode theme and normal light mode. There are a lot of people who seem to have eye strain and prefer the dark mode, so that's options there for you. As mentioned in the web permissions slide, the client returns menu can only be accessed when APS uses agent returns list Joe setting is ticked. The client returns page has a button labeled Lodge Selected Returns with ID, and it is only visible when the agent returns lodgement Joe setting is ticked. It is this Lodge Selected Returns with ID button that is used to submit approved returns to ID via gateway services, and it's this that provides the e-file replacement functionality. The primary filter on this page is the status filter. It allows you to choose a single status or effectively remove status as a filter by choosing Show All. When the page first loads, the approved status is defaulted in preparation for lodging returns to ID. In this example, the all statuses are shown as seen in the highlighted status column. The return type filter lets you easily separate GST returns from all other annual income returns that are grouped under the Inc. return type. In this example, the highlighted form type column shows various annual income forms, along with the I-526 tax credits and I-4J forms, and they're all grouped under that Inc. return type. There's a tax year column and a period end column, and they can be used to further filter returns by the period in which they fall. Lastly, we've also provided a client search option that lets you enter one or more sets of characters that will return any rows whose client name contains those characters. So you can see in this example, showing the consecutive characters PA, and those are appearing in different parts of the various names in that list. An important caveat to having access to the Lodge Selected Returns button, or in fact being able to do anything else involving ID interaction, is having an authenticated MyIR login for the tax agent context that you're in. Prior to entering your MyIR credentials, the MyIR status visual queue sitting alongside the shortcut to your login pop-up will be grey and show an X symbol. And instead of seeing the Lodge button, you'll instead see a warning telling you that you need to do something before you can continue with the lodging process. Clicking on the MyIR status at any time will prompt you to enter your MyIR credentials. Once your MyIR login code and password have been validated by IRD, the MyIR status turns green and shows a tick symbol, and then the button allowing you to lodge is displayed. For displayed rows with an approved status, you can click on the tick box at the far left of the row to select it, and click it again to deselect it. You can also click on the tick box sitting in the column names area to select all rows or deselect all rows. Once one or more rows have been selected, you can click the Lodge Selected Returns button. Each selected row is immediately queued for lodgement, with the return status amended to Lodge Requested. Depending on the number of returns and the load on ID services at that time, it might take a few moments for each return lodgement request to be sent to ID over gateway services and for the response to be returned. When you change the return status filter to lodged, then the returns you select for lodgement will have had their status updated to lodged and will be visible in this list. When returns are at that lodged status, we are providing an ability to drill down to the individual lodged returns. For now, though, we are not displaying income and tax info on annual income returns. What is being provided, however, on income returns is access to notifications and documents that ID make available once a return is processed. For GST returns, you'll have access to full return details. That means you can create new returns, retrieve previously lodged returns that had already been sent to ID, and navigate around those various returns and make those comparisons pretty easily in that UI. We are finalising at present our GST report creation function, and that creates and stores a PDF format GST summary report for the current GST return. Returning back to the tax agent view, with the client links info Joe setting ticked, the user access the client ID links page. And if the client links update Joe setting is ticked, then you have access to the update all clients and submit changes buttons. The update all clients action is effectively an onboarding request to ID. Link information for all tax types for all clients linked to the current tax agent context are retrieved from ID. There are also additional redirection flags on each individual tax type. An individual client row refresh using the rows refresh button is required to retrieve those individual redirection settings though. We've provided a couple of little hint pop-up, and that describes a couple of the visual cues that we've included on this page. So pale blue sitting behind the tick boxes under the individual tax types, that indicates that a different tax agent in the practice has been linked to those particular tax types. We're currently in Barking Castle context, but these ones have been linked to a different tax agent in the practice. And pale pink, that's indicating a partial or incomplete ID link. So again, depending on the timing of the creation of the record and the retrieval, the previous retrieval from ID on that link information, will show this background indicating you should click that to do a quick refresh of that row. So in summary, there's a lot going on in the web. There's a lot of desktop integration. So we've got a bulk client onboarding function from the desktop. There's user onboarding, so those web permissions and link tax agent details that we showed earlier on, those get created to control the user access. Web return status changes are reflected back to the desktop. Web notifications of the various sorts are also logged back to the desktop. We've got that missing web client request, so if a link information is provided from ID into the cloud and we don't have that client's information yet in the cloud, we can pull that through. And also, we've now got these new lists. So agent lists, we've got the returns with filters, typically organized by status. We've got lodgement to ID by the authenticated MyIR user, and we've got access to that taxpayer ID links page. And in terms of clients and returns down in the detail, we can access the client details. For GST returns, you can create, edit, and lodge those returns. For approved income returns, you can lodge those to ID. We've got the GST report and ID documents integration and storage. So we're now creating a document store so you can upload documents from the desktop to the store in preparation for sending on to ID if that's required. You can retrieve documents that ID generate, and we can also create return reports like the GST report, and they'll all be stored in this document store.
Thanks, Nigel. So over to our first poll. On our first poll, we'd like to know who will be installing the new release as soon as it's available, i.e. by the end of September. So please select either yes, no, or undecided. So whether you will be installing this new release as soon as it's available within that first 2 weeks. So we'll give you a couple of moments to complete that. Hopefully it's a fairly easy decision to make, but it will help us get an idea of the impact on the system of people putting on this new release. So I think we have most people have answered that poll. So if we now go back to our presentation. So on to how we can stay in touch. Please continue to communicate with each other in the New Zealand Tax Forum. It also provides us with the ability to post details of any hot fixes, for example, or any urgent information that we want to make available to you all. So you all find out this information as soon as it's available and that it's relevant to you. If you don't want to be subscribed, or you've got people in the office who are subscribed who don't want to be, there is an unsubscribe link within the tax forum, so look out for that. So on to our hotfix process. Now, although we're able to make some changes silently through the tax solution via the cloud services, so changes to the web returns, for example, and also to some of the TDS settings, unfortunately, we will quite probably have some hotfixes that need to be applied to the desktop solution, which will need to be installed on site. So our process for this is that they will be scheduled for release on a regular fortnightly basis, and the known issues article will indicate when the issue is fixed and in which hotfix release it has been made available in. So for detail on the known issues and any other important information relevant to the New Zealand Tax product, please just go straight to the New Zealand Tax product page in the My APS portal. You'll have direct access to the known issues, links, as well as any other relevant information. So, sorry, Craig, have there been any questions about this particular release as yet?
Yes, there have been a few. Let's just start with the most recent ones. Just in terms of the, let's go back here, the private cloud, do we know when that will be updated?
No, so there will be notification to the private cloud users when they will be updating the release. So that's handled by that particular department.
Okay, and we have another one here regarding the GST web returns. Do the GST web returns also have the same or similar Joe admin settings to enable rights for lodgement that the income returns have?
So with this release, the setting that we're saying allowing you to lodge to IID has been implemented for the GST returns as well. So you will be able to do everything up to the approval state, but you won't be able to do the lodgement process unless you have that Joe Right setting assigned. So in the prior release, you could do everything. Now we've implemented that restriction or that Joe setting that only allows you to do lodgement if you do have that Joe setting assigned.
Okay.
So just to clarify, Nigel, that will be lodgement of GST returns and income tax returns will be managed by the same.
Correct.
Yeah.
You're interested in feedback if people want to have a differentiation between GST, who can do GST lodgement and who can do Inc lodgement. Yeah, we're happy to review that, but we've kept it simple at this stage. So there's a single Joe setting to manage access to all lodgements through the web.
Okay. It's another one here with the current GST module, which integrates with XPA and feeds through. How will this work with the new GST returns?
So we are looking at, at the moment there isn't any other integration in the web returns. We have been looking at how to get XPA data into the cloud and then have that feed through to the returns. Quite a lot of effort to do that. So and the Ledger Plus project is probably taking precedence, and once we get that data present, then we'll relook at that. Also looking at bank data as a source, so we could pull mapped bank data, transactional information, and collate that into the GST return. They are on our roadmap, but they are several months away.
Okay. Just one more here about the TDS refinements, just in terms of the enhancements that have been made. Will they go back and fix prior incorrect discards, or will it just be for transactions moving forward?
At the moment, it would only be the plan is at present for only for existing transactions moving forward. We again, if we've got clients who've got a number of those discarded transactions that they feel is an issue, we could potentially look at ways to unwind them all. I guess the thing we obviously don't want to do is unwind ones that people have actually made a manual decision to discard separately. So a little bit of care would be needed to do that, but we could look at that.
I would
All right.
assume that most
Maybe just
people have already fixed those up already, but please do let us know if you still have those ones outstanding.
Great. Maybe one more for now. Will there be L&D letter requests added in the future?
To the client dashboard to notify IRD? Assuming that they mean that.
Okay. All right, we'll find out. We'll find out more on that one.
Yeah, we'll have to get some more information on that.
Okay.
Great. So if that's all,
we move on for now.
Yeah, that'd be great. If we do miss any questions, we will endeavour to answer those through the forum or through the link to the webinar detail. So what's next? Our development team have been very busy working on the web return formats, particularly to be able to prepare the tax returns in the cloud, as well as providing the shell tax returns from the desktop to be able to lodge. And we are now moving forward to look at what reporting you would like available in this new web format and how you're going to notify your clients of their various tax liabilities, etc. So on to the reports. So with the move to the new application, we're able to review all of the ancillary functions of the tax return preparation and administration. And one of these, and a major one at that, is the reporting that you provide to your clients based on the tax return. Now, we're making an assumption here that some kind of tax summary is definitely needed to provide to the client. So we're open to your input and feedback as to how you would like this formatted. So this currently is the format that we have. So is this the kind of detail that you would want to show your clients? Is there more detail at this point that you would like to show your clients? So we are looking for feedback for that. And then obviously the other part of the tax summary report is the payment schedule. We would like to look at, firstly, whether this is still relevant and if there is a better way to articulate or present this. I think everyone has quite a broad range of emotions when it comes to the payment schedule, but we are looking to how this should be presented to your clients, if it's still needed to be presented to your clients, if there are other ways that we should be looking at this. And then, of course, there are a number of other reports that are available in the current tax product that have been around for a very long time. We now have the opportunity to carry out a bit of an audit. Which ones are used? Would you, for example, ever print a copy of the ledger, either to use internally or to send to a client? I imagine not, but please let us know if there is a use case scenario for this, for example. And are there any reports that we're missing? Do you still want to see a key point detail report? Do you want to be able to see the schedules and send those to your clients? Are there any other reports or any other information that you would like to send to your clients with their tax return? And then, of course, the good old family group tax summary that was introduced relatively recently. We still want to see if this is fit for purpose, if there is still obviously a use case for it, or is there anything that we can do to update or upgrade that family group tax summary. So another aspect of tax that we're looking at is the method of notification. So the availability of more and more information from IRD that can be accessed directly from within the APS software will hopefully remove the need for the My IR site. That's where IRD want to go, and that's where we're happy to develop the software to make APS your one-stop shop for information. Now, the 901 has gone the way of the ARC. So to replace the 901, we are looking at using the functionality available in the Ledger Balances application of being able to set up a template that can send a formatted letter either via email or printed to PDF to post. But we're also looking at whether we can add or whether we should add SMS or text messaging as an option. We're also keen to develop a client portal that will actually allow your clients to log into their tax account from within the APS software, where they can find out all about their tax account, how much they owe, how much they can expect as a refund, and communicate with you about it if they have any questions or concerns. We also understand that you will want the ability to edit the amount that the IRD have stipulated for payment, i.e. suggesting voluntary amount or estimating the tax to pay without necessarily notifying IRD. So we will still allow for this in the future development of that notifications functionality. So on to our next poll. What we would like to find out from you here is which method or methods will you use or continue to use to communicate with your clients. Now, please select as many as are applicable. So would you be using the SMS text messaging option? Will you still be using email? Do you still have a use case for posting letters to your clients? And would you be interested in that client portal? So please select any or all that will apply for those methods that you want to use to communicate to your clients.
We'd really like to see that letter percentage drop to drop down, but
To
I
zero,
suspect it won't.
but yep, I think there is still going to be a use case for letters, but I would imagine it's going to become less and less, particularly if the SMS text messaging is available. Most people have that available to them now.
Yep. We could
So,
move towards the way ledger balances are moving and having at least have the letter generated to emulate an email effectively, so you're not having to have a separate PDF or attachment, that kind of thing.
A separate format specifically for letters.
Yeah.
So thank you for your contributions. Let's move on to a couple of topics that have come up. Oh, sorry, no, let's have a look at, are there any questions specifically about the New Zealand tax roadmap? What is coming up? Any questions or comments there? Craig, has there been anything listed?
Yeah, there's been a few. This one's quite a good one. It says, how confident is APS that this release will be released in September, as it's vitally important that we have plenty of lead time before e-file shuts off?
Yeah, so that is already the primary goal, is to get well ahead of the game. In fact, we're the only developers who are doing this work at the moment. And as a result of that, we're having a bit more of a hassle with IRD in terms of getting this functionality over the line, because we are effectively the leading software providers providing this functionality. But having said that, yeah, I mean, the idea is having it in September, going out initially to a couple of clients before we make it a general release, and then having everybody, certainly by November, is our target, to have everybody have this installed and be running through the new web lodgement. So e-file is gone.
And to give you some confidence, we literally are 95% of the way there. So everything's done. We've done all of the testing. IRD have received the lodged returns. So it is really a little bit of tweaking that's required now. So that's why we've decided to push it out just that extra couple of weeks. So
Yeah,
it certainly isn't going to be the end of October or anything nasty like that. It literally is very
No.
close, isn't it, Nigel?
No. Yep, the lodgements are working fine. It's really just there are some notifications that come back as a result of that. And ID's test system just isn't providing a complete replica of what a production environment would be. So they're having to mock things up, and it's just making it harder for us to confirm that those notifications tie up with the returns that have been lodged. So that's
Great.
where it's at. The return lodgement side of it's fine.
So any other questions there, Craig?
Yeah, can you forward date a tax return but file today as opposed to currently having to hold off filing?
We have made a slight amendment, so you can at least you can't lodge ahead of time, but you can now push it through to ready to lodge, and it just won't be selectable for the lodgement phase until that calculation date has been reached. So whereas I think in the current desktop you basically can't actually send the return off to the e-file system until it has been until that calculation date's reached, we have made a small change to push the restriction of when it gets lodged to ID a bit further down the process.
Okay. One more here about how long before a link to TMNZ is built into the product for tax quotes and payments, etc.
So interesting you should ask that. We will be covering TMNZ, but at the moment it still resides in the desktop product.
Yeah,
Okay.
certainly. Obviously, once we
And
get those returns prepared in the web, then we'll be able to look at that TMNZ integration. But for now, the focus is making those functions work in the desktop. But there's something coming up shortly on that.
Great.
Okay.
So anything particularly on the roadmap, Craig?
No, just there's a couple of comments about that one. Some users suggest that it could be completely dropped, but then others are saying no way we'll get a letter percentage to zero in the Ruapehu area. So there's obviously some mixed emotions about that one.
Yep.
And there are others that we'll probably need to address directly. But otherwise,
Great.
it's okay for now.
Thanks, Craig. So on to, I've called them interesting topics. We're just going to cover off a couple of things that have come up recently. There was a post on the forum about losses to carry back. I know there is some interest around the residential rental ring fencing treatment. And also, as we said, we have the TMNZ tax pooling to re-look at with you. So on to losses carried back. Now, our problem here is that IRD added this very late in the piece, and it's particularly to do with COVID. So IRD have talked about adding a new element to enable this, which will only be available in gateway services, so not through e-file. And effectively, it's adding another key point. Now, the problem is that IRD has not given us any indication as to when this will be available. When it is, we can write this back from the web application into the desktop to push this back through to the web return. It is possible that we will need to continue to use the workaround in place until 2021 when we go to the full web lodgement scenario. So in reporting, it is difficult to be able to pull this information out so that it prints separately on this report. Included in our survey, we will ask a question about how many of your clients this does actually affect. So if it's not in the survey, if you can add it into, or not specified in the survey, just add it into the feedback sections in the survey as to how many clients this would actually affect. But it is important to remember to ensure that in the description that you type in for the loss to carry back, that it starts with 2021, and then the system can pick that up and be able to use that information for rolling the return, etc. So another interesting point that's we've been going through is the residential rental ring fencing, which was added in the April release with the changes to tax legislation. So as you all know, there are 3 options available. There's individual, which are standalone properties, portfolio, which allows for excess deductions to be distributed between the properties in the portfolio, and then combined, which is obviously a combination of the 2. Now, it is almost impossible for the system to work out how the excess deductions can be or should be distributed. It may seem simple enough, particularly you might have 2 properties, one has income, the other one has the excess deductions. That would be pretty straightforward to then put the excess deductions against the income. But this is just one of many scenarios. So it is therefore up to the tax preparer to make the call on how those expenses or those excess deductions should be distributed between the properties. Now on to TMNZ. With all the changes to IRD's tax payment requirements, we're finding that practices are actually using tax pooling more rather than less than in prior years. And as you will all know, we do have a direct integration to TMNZ from within the use of money interest screen, where you can get a quote directly from TMNZ, and with the appropriate login for TMNZ, you can make a purchase. We have a short video that we have been working with TMNZ to show how simple this integration is. So over to the video. Thank you, Nigel. So as you can see here, we've got Central Console showing. You go into the tax returns band, select the tax year that's appropriate, and select the use of money interest calculator. From here, you can look at the client's tax liability. You can then, here it's $1,200, you can then go and get a quote for the tax liability. And you can see there the date of the quote. You can then make the appropriate changes to the payment dates, which are now available. You can agree to the purchase by selecting it and selecting purchase. That goes off to TMNZ. You will get a FlexiTax email confirming the purchase, and then you can synchronize that to your ledger. Won't put in the amount until it's actually been confirmed as the payment coming through from IRD, but you can at least see that there has been a tax payment made. So all of this information is also available in real time on the TMNZ website as well once you make the purchase. And don't forget, the information on how to do this is available in the online help documentation that is available in the tax application. So, do we have any questions on any of these particular topics, Craig?
There's just some leftovers that we haven't really got to before. We've got a few minutes for those, some of those maybe.
We've got probably 2 minutes.
Okay. Right, one is about the GST filing system. We might have covered it, but how long can we stay with the existing GST filing system?
So e-file is finishing in March 2021. So that's the longest you can basically stick with it. I mean, our current position is we want everybody off e-file by the end of November. It's just so we've got plenty of contingency and lead time well ahead of that date. So that would be the preferred option, is to be moving by November at the latest.
So
Right,
any other questions?
Right, there were a couple about there were a couple of other comments still to do with the. Oh, here's another one. We're finding it doesn't work that well with where needed to do. Oh, sorry, it's about due to issues with late payment and falling out of safe harbor. Finding it doesn't work well where we falling out of safe harbor. I think it's an issue that we've we've addressed. Well, I can deal with that one separately. Yep. Otherwise, there we've covered. Yeah, I think that's all for now. The others we can always address outside of the
Great.
session.
Thank you, Craig. So almost bang on time. Thank you all. Nigel, wake up, change the screen. Thank you all for joining us today and for your active participation. We do love all of your questions. If we didn't get to your questions today, we will address these either directly with you or through the forum. A copy of the slide deck and a link to the recording will be made available through the forum as well. Please let your colleagues know who may not have been able to join us today that they will be able to watch the recording so they don't miss out. Feel free to watch it over and over again yourselves. And please do stay in touch via the forum as well. Also, if you would like to be involved in the research groups, so they are the focus groups where we'll be interviewing a selected number of clients to find out all of your thoughts on the tax application going into the future. So it will give you an opportunity to have an impact on the future development of the product. Please email apsevents@reckon.com. So that's APS events, all one word, @reckon.com. You'll also be prompted at the end of the webinar today to complete a short survey. We really would like and appreciate your feedback on this. So from Nigel, Craig, and me, goodbye until next time. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.